right? So the cloning process, as we mentioned, will copy from one place to another. All right, so if we go to our toolbar, and it might take me a second to find it because they've kind of moved things around since I've been in here last time. Actually, let me... Okay, so this is our clone tool. You can see there is a clone stamp as well if we hold this down, or I'm sorry, a pattern stamp. But we're going to use the clone stamp. And then what you want to see is your cursor change to a circle so that we can kind of see how big your brush size is. So there we go. You have to press the caps lock key sometimes to change it from the crosshair to the circle. And this is going to indicate how big the sampling area is. All right, I'm going to zoom in also, not because I really want to see myself any closer, but so I can, more importantly, so I can see the size of that brush and my detail. All right, so I'm going to kind of go to a small size, and then what I'm going to do is press the Alt key on the keyboard. When I do that, you notice that the cursor turns to basically a crosshair, and that, as we said, is our source. All right, it's going to define where we're copying from. So, and this is where it kind of gets a little tricky and you need a little practice. So you're going to press Alt, you're going to left click to define your source area. Then if you let go, notice that that little plus, that's indicating where you're copying from. So now I can go over there and I can cover up where I want to cover. Now what you have to do though is, and as I mentioned, that relationship of that kind of the source and the target is always staying the same until you redefine it. So to cover this area, I might say that I want to copy from up here. So I'm going to then again press the Alt key and left click to define where I'm copying from, and then I will let go, and now I'll see the plus and the circle to show where I'm copying to. All right, so it's Alt left click to define where you're copying from, and then let go, and then you can kind of paste and paint over that. So you have to constantly be kind of redefining that target area or that source area so that you can kind of blend in an area that's close by to it. All right, so that's the process, and what we want to do obviously is have this kind of blend in as closely as possible. It's not going to be probably perfect, and it does look a little bit weird when you're done, but I'm going to try to get rid of all my lips here and try to blend this in. Maybe when we're done with this we'll use some blending tools, but this is the process. So it's Alt left click to define where you're copying from, you let go, and then you should see that's the plus and the circle showing where you're copying from and to. All right, so you do a little piece at a time, then redefine most likely, and then kind of just keep going until you have your area covered, which would basically be the lips there. And now that looks very strange and creepy, but when we put the mouth over it, we're not going to see any of that stuff behind there.
Please keep that up for a moment. I need your attention.
So another way, as this other tool that they do have for correction tools is called the spot healing, which Yasker reminded, and I was going to try that there. So this one looks like a Band-Aid. All right, and that one we just are going to paint over the area. Oh, sorry, I'm still on the spot here, the clone. But what it does is it pulls pixels from around it. So it's not exact, but really you can try starting with that. Actually, not too bad, right? So you could just use that one, and that actually kind of blends things a little bit better too. So that's the one that looks like the Band-Aid. All right, if you want to start with that one, there's no sense in doing things the hard way if we don't have to really, right? But if that doesn't work, then you might want to go in there and use that clone tool. There is also, which can be nice, you have the blur or smudge. I think the smudge is what I've used also at some points. So if you have kind of some rough kind of pixels in there, you know, as you can see, this is smoothing that out, all right, and making it not look so rough. It kind of smudges, or think of if you've ever used charcoal to draw, or a blending stick. That's kind of what the smudge is doing. It's going to take those pixels and kind of like squish them together or smudge them together, as it would say. So I don't like the way it looks up here, but down here that's pretty good with that. All right, so something like that cringeworthy picture that we have there. Okay, so and then to get rid of our background, if you forget, we're gonna first, we can start by using that quick selection tool. We can try using that. Try to do it the quickest way first. All right, so I'm gonna just kind of drag around. Now I got lucky here, I guess, but if you need to take away or remove from the selection, remember the Alt key. Is it Alt? Will take away. All right, so if we need to refine that edge, we can. Should have a plus or a minus. Am I pressing the wrong button? Nope, we don't want that. There we go. So with that circle a little bit bigger. So remember, the plus in there is going to add to the selection, right? Or if we press the Alt, it turns to minus, and then we can kind of refine that edge. All right, so make sure that that circle is kind of the appropriate size, and then you can use that Alt key to take away or add to that selection. So right now I selected all that, all right, and then actually, if we want to do hair, right, so actually we did this a little bit better. That would kind of, we could delete that, and before we delete that background, we have to unlock that background layer. Then we can press delete and it truly removes that. But you might have some rough edges around your hair. So really, I think what we did a little bit more precise. Instead of selecting the green, if we select the body, right, our actual form, and then we do select and mask. All right, so this isn't really getting rid of that green, it's going to be hiding it. And then if you have some crazy hair fibers in there, you can use this refine edge brush tool, and then just kind of little by little, if you go over the edge of your hairline, you should be able to kind of separate the hair follicles from that background, right? So that you don't get these choppy looking edges. All right, so we did that refine edge, refine and mask, and then use the refine edge tool. Once you get that to where you want it to be, I always check off decontaminate colors. That takes out a little bit more of that green.
Where is the refine edge brush?
In that refine and mask window, it's the second like brush down from the top. All right, and then we're going to say as our output, new layer with layer mask. All right, so now I have this, it brings me back to the original. It's showing me that this layer has a mask in there. And then we can bring in our whatever background picture we want by saying File, Place Embedded. All right, and let me find a picture to use for here. You know, I think this is going to be kind of like your New Year's resolution type of thing. All right, so got to have some pictures in here to use. I'll choose some beach pictures here and whatnot. Is this the boardwalk or something? So we're going to place this. We'll scale it to fit. and then just bring that behind that other layer. Alright, so this would be getting our image prepped so that we can then bring it into Illustrator, and then we'll work with the mouths to, actually we're not going to bring this into Illustrator, we're going to bring this directly into Animate, and the mouths that we create will then kind of bring them in as well. Alright, so I'll stop at this point, and then once everybody's kind of caught up, we'll move on to the mouth preparation. Okay, so when we're done with this, we can save it as a PSD. To save that, in case you do want to go back and change your background or something, always good to have your Photoshop document. It will require us to kind of change one setting in Animate, or kind of in our import options. Alright, but we're going to save that. That's kind of getting us ready for that part. So we could go to do our mouth poses, but let's kind of start getting our stuff set up in Animate. Yes. A couple of years ago, when we used to take field trips more often, that was at the Manasquan Inlet. We'd go there and do some stuff there. Alright, so in Animate, we're going to go to, in our welcome screen, we can probably just use this full HD, but let's look at some of our other presets and see. Yeah, that's 1920 by 1080. So that's typically what we want for you know, a TV or your computer screens, right? So when we create new, let's just do this full HD, which is 1920 by 1080. We'll do a create. Could have given it a name to start with. That probably would have been a good idea. And then we want to import, right? So file, import, just like we did yesterday. So you're not opening that Photoshop document because, you know, in computer language, right, if we do open, it's only looking for another Animate project. So it will not recognize your Photoshop file. However, we can import it, right, just like any other reusable item. And then, so we have some options here, all right? We can, if we wanted to only have certain layers in there, we could, you know, just select whichever ones we want. But I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to choose Flattened Bitmap Image. So then it's going to be kind of merged together into one, I believe. Hopefully this, and I'm going to check this off down here also, just to make sure, you know what, I don't like that because it kind of did some weird stuff up there. Let's see how this looks here. So I imported it, and now I should just be able to drag this onto my stage. It looks good, it's merged there. Alright, so now we just have to kind of scale it down. So I'm going to zoom out and use my free transform tool to get this to fit to my stage area. So our aspect ratio is a little bit different in Photoshop. We can scale this to get rid of the, you know, so we don't have that white space, or you can kind of stretch it a little bit, I guess, also. So I'm kind of doing here. So I'm going to kind of position it like that. And then I can zoom back in to kind of see what that's going to look like from there. Alright, so remember, this black line is going to be basically your live area, or the printable area where that is. So let's save this as New Year's, what do we call that, goal? New Year goals, right? That was kind of that story title that we had from yesterday, which I did go in there and grade everybody's. Some of your stories didn't really make sense. I don't know if you quite got the concept that your the sentences are going to kind of all be tied together, and that just picking a random adjective or verb wasn't really going to fit with that story. So I did make comments. I don't know if you guys got emails with the responses back. I did change that setting afterwards, but you are going to need your scripts, as you will, if you think of it in that way, when we get to the last part of this. Alright, so I'm going to say this is going here, New Year goal, save to there. Alright, so that is that part. So now we have this part of it, so then we just need our mouth on top of there, and our audio will be the final two parts on this. Alright, so let me pause here for a second. Alright, so if we just do a Google image search for mouth poses, you know, try to find something that's going to somewhat match your face. Alright, I'll filter by images. And I want some kind of realistic looking ones. You know, how about this one? Oh, we didn't cartoonize ourselves. I guess we're not really going to be doing that. Forgot to look for a filter on that. Alright, so I'm going to choose this picture, and depending on the sites that you have, like, let's see if this works here. If I download this, it does want me to sign up, but we can use our accounts. And
Is that Pinterest?
this is called depositphotos.com. Oh, wait, I guess this is not going to work because they want me to pay. Not paying, sorry.
They want me to pay though.
I could do a screenshot, which would probably work, but I want to see if I can get something a little higher resolution. Michael, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say, if it seems too good to be true, it most likely is.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go back to our original search here. How about this one? That's got that fake transparency. That's going to be tough. Try to choose something with like a solid background. A lot of these are watermarked also. Some vampire-ish mouth.
I for drawing mouth charts because that's what I do. I found stuff.
Now we could, though, you know, these are watermarked, and I mean, obviously for copyright reasons, you don't, whether in a professional setting, want to go back and kind of really manipulate that. But since we've just learned the clone stamp, we could actually go in here with this image and we could kind of remove that watermark based on what we just learned before. Let's see if I find any other mouths and try to not do that as much as far as infringing on some copyright, even though it's kind of, we're doing a lot of stuff anyway. Alright, this one's kind of simple. I think this could definitely work, make things kind of easy to do. Now the mouth isn't going to totally match up, but as far as like your appearance, this has a big page of stuff here. Let's see. This is on Pinterest. Let's see if we can get it through Pinterest. Okay.
The 3 dots, those download button.
Thank you. Alright, so this is a JPEG, JFIF. I think that'll still open in Photoshop. So I'm going to save that to my same folder. Alright, once you find one, a lot of times you can also right click on the image and do save image as. So I'm going to go into here, open this, and I'm just going to call this mouths. Did that save there? Where'd that go? Alright, so that did go to where I want it to be. Alright, so now we're going to go back to Photoshop, and then I'm going to open that file that I just saved. Alright, and for this, I'm going to start by removing my background. I will use, and these are, all your pictures are going to vary a little bit as far as how you're preparing it. But basically, you want to remove any solid background. I can do it pretty easily with this one, with the magic wand. Alright, and then what we'll do with this is we're going to make new layers from each pose. So all you have to do, probably the quickest way would be to use the marquee tool. I'm going to draw a box around this mouth, and I can right click on it and say layer via cut. Actually, I'll do a copy. Alright, that way it kind of retains the original layer rather than cutting it out from it. So now I have that layer there, and I can rename this as A. All right. So then I'll just kind of go back. I'm going to select my initial, my composite layer, the one that has all of it in it. I'll make another box around my next pose. I'm going to right click and say layer via copy. All right, so I have that one on there. And then I'm going to rename that so that I know that that's my O pose. All right, come back to my original. Again, use my selection tool, my marquee. Make a box around it, layer via copy. Rename. So all we're doing is removing that background, and then from the kind of composite image, you know, the combination of all them, we're using the marquee tool, as it's called, and doing layer via copy over and over again, and then just renaming it so that we know what those poses are. All right, let me finish up on this, and then I'll come around. Carolyn, give me 1 minute. I should be able to do this kind of quickly. All right, 3 more. So if you were, you know, creating your own character and these, you know, having this all uncopyrighted, because technically, you know, this would not be the appropriate thing to do in a professional setting, right? You kind of create a cartoon and somebody recognizes their mouths, there's going to be a problem, right? If you've kind of created a series and, you know, going through all that. So yeah, and I got an error message there because I have this layer selected, but this pose is not on it. So that's why you always have to go back to that original layer, and that's where you're making your copies so that it's actually, there's something there. So that's sometimes what becomes something you have to pay attention. Well, a lot of times you do have to pay attention in Photoshop. That's some of the detail to make sure you have the right layer selected. Because if you're trying to choose something, so even though right now, like if I'm up on this layer, this pose is not in there, so I have to make sure I'm getting it from there. And then this is my last one here. So this is my F and V. Alright, so I'm going to save this as mouth poses, and then we will be ready to bring that into Animate and create our kind of nested timeline of mouth poses. Alright. So I'm going to save that there. I'll pause our recording. Alright, so after we've prepared all of our layers in Photoshop, alright, the next thing we'll do is go back to Animate, and we're going to say File, as we've done in the past, Import to Library, and now we're going to look for that file there, which mouth poses, alright, is what I called mine. It's a Photoshop document. Has today's date on there, so I know that's correct. This time we do not want a flattened bitmap image. We want bitmap image with editable layer styles. Alright, and
Do we want to give this instance a name?
we can call this mouth pose. It doesn't, I don't think it's going to matter that much. That really kind of these instances, if we were creating buttons, that's where that really comes into play. Alright, and then, so once they're imported, alright, it doesn't really matter which pose you start with, but we're just going to take one of our poses. Strange how one of these is a movie clip and the other is not. Alright, I'm going to keep them all as this. Oh, so I want a new layer, right? Because I don't want to have this combined with my background picture. So I'm just going to call this one person, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it there. So I'm going to make a new layer, Press the plus. We're going to call this the mouth. And now I'm going to drag in my first pose. Okay, thank you.
Yep. We don't, one of them does not have a name, so we don't know who got that one.
All right, we'll have to use process of elimination.
Okay.
Okay.
So the last part we'll work on today is just getting the mouth kind of sequence in, just like we had from yesterday. And then tomorrow or after that, you can just record your audio and do the same thing we did on the practice activities. All right. So what we're doing this last part here, we'll get those mouths that you just created so that they can be applied to the audio once we get them into there. All right. So when we get this into Animate, as we were, let's just see. We didn't have our initial frames in there. Trying to undo and go back a little bit so that. Okay, we have something like this. Let's just get this. All right, so at this point you should have your two layers and we just have them in a single frame. I'm just going to take these out because that's, I believe, where we were, right? So we have our person in the background. We can see that. We have your mouth. And I would try to choose kind of like a neutral pose, all right? Because that's going to be, you know, like your resting pose of your mouth, whatever you have in there. Get it resized to fit in your mouth. All right, so, and you can scan through here to find that. It gives you a nice preview. All right, so if you didn't have that, you know, we just made that mouth layer and we bring in, make sure you have the right layer selected. Probably a good practice at this point too to lock your person layer, just so you don't accidentally do something on that layer. But now I have this one imported and maybe that's a little bit big, so I'm just going to shrink it down here, right? So we have two layers. You have your background picture on the lower one and your mouth on the top with that first kind of neutral pose in there. All right. At that point, we're going to convert this mouth into a symbol. All right. So this is kind of new stuff, but actually, I think we had done it kind of in some greeting card. So you're just going to say modify and then convert to symbol. All right. I would call this mouths or mouth sequence, something like that. And it's going to be a graphic. All right, so that's our type. So we have that mouth placed, and then we said modify, convert to symbol, and we're going to make this a graphic symbol. All right, nothing really happened. It just kind of changed it. Now we can see we have this new item in our library. But now when we double click it, we get their background gets grayed out because we've gone into this sub-selection mode. You can kind of see that here up at the top, in that we have mouth 1 is part of scene 1, and we have a new timeline that doesn't show our background picture. And again, that's because we double clicked it and we're getting into what's called this nested timeline. This timeline that we're now going to be creating is actually residing inside of this graphic symbol that we have placed on here. So hopefully you start to understand this concept of nested symbols. All right. But then, so now that we have this, and you should see that we have scene 1 mouths. If you're just in scene 1, then you're not going to be setting it up correctly, all right? I'm going to just go through this, and then I'll come back and help you troubleshoot. So maybe you want to just keep watching to kind of get the concept of it, all right? So at this point, now we're going to put in our other poses. So I'm going to go to the next frame. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to say Insert Blank Keyframe. We don't want to do a keyframe because then that's going to repeat that previous pose also. And then I can start going into here and I can drag on my other mouth. Now, we see this mouth, but we don't really know positioning or size. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this tool called the onion skin tool. All right. What that allows you to do is see the frame before and after. All right. So now I can see that's where that one was, and I can then I know with mine I have to resize them a little bit, but at least you can see what the size of the one was before that. Alright, and I can use the arrow to kind of nudge this and get it to be in position of where I want it to be. Alright, maybe you want to zoom in even a little bit more so we can really get a close-up, and that, yeah, now we can see that that matches up. Alright, and then we'll repeat that. We're going to go to the next frame, right click, insert a blank keyframe. Alright, so now I can see that one became purple because I already used that one. And then I'm going to drag this one in, resize it, reposition. Alright, and then you'll repeat. Alright, the test of this will be if we go back to scene 1, alright, and on your mouth layer, you can pick any number, just like we did on our demo. We're going to insert a frame. Alright, and now this is going to cycle through those. Alright, so what we want to do is on the first frame, we want to go to our properties. We're going to say that this is just going to be a single frame for the graphic. So now it's not going to cycle through those. Remember, if I want my background to stay, I can just insert a frame there. Right? But now, so if I had my audio, I could do the lip syncing. But really, for the next frame here, let's think manually. Want to change a pose? We can go to Frame Picker. And now we see those other poses that we have from that other timeline. So we could swap out and see those different poses being there. Alright, so that will be the process though. I'm not going to go through and really show the entirety of what we're looking at there. I'm just going to go back. So what you would be doing is just make sure you double click, and on this nested timeline, again, it's right click, insert blank keyframe. And then in your library, you're going to take each pose and overlap the previous one, kind of get your size and your position the way it should be. And then when you're done, then all we'll have to do is insert our audio and do the lip syncing, and it should kind of match up with and apply all these poses the way that we did yesterday. All right, so that is it on this process. I will have this video prepared and you can look at that.